Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The city of Lethbridge will be receiving 2 new ambulances. Officials say they will run 12 hours a day, helping to provide advanced life support. A red carpet prom night experience was held in Lethbridge on Friday night, honoring those with special needs. BCN's Micah Quinn has the details. And our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari has more on the unidentified flying objects which are being shot down across North America.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. To help improve emergency medical response time, the City of Lethbridge, along with Alberta Health Services, will be adding 2 new ambulances. The new vehicles will run 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Chief of Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services, Greg Adair, says these new additions will help ease some of the burden the service is currently dealing with.
We'll be able to continue to provide advanced life support services to people who have emergency medical requirements, and in their times of need, we'll be able to have 2 additional ambulances respond to the calls. Currently, Lethbridge has 8 ambulances at the peak throughout the day. This will increase that number to 10. So we'll have 2 more available resources to respond to calls. So that will help with some of those resource challenges we're seeing.
Acting Mayor for the City of Lethbridge, Jen Schmidt-Rempel, says this is something that the city has needed for quite some time.
We certainly appreciate that AHS has worked collaboratively with our EMS teams to be able to get this service down here. It will alleviate some of those pressures that our EMS teams are seeing right now. It's going to improve their morale, as well as making sure that our residents here in the City of Lethbridge are getting the services that they need. But we do recognize that our EMS team and AHS worked really hard to come to the table to an agreement to get us these extra 2 ambulances to serve our area.
Lethbridge Fire and EMS hope to have the ambulances fully operational and on the road by May the 1st. The Alberta government says it is creating 600 new seats for nurse bridging programs and investing in a new bursary for internationally educated nurses. Through Budget 2023, the province would invest more than $15 million to train and support nurses arriving from all over the world. Officials say this will help to ensure Alberta's healthcare system remains strong now and into the future.
We need their skills urgently, and we are committed to investing in these programs to remove the barriers that they face. Getting a spot in and completing bridging programs can often be a slow and frustrating process that, until now, has prevented many of these internationally trained nurses from pursuing their careers and doing the job that they're eager to do and, quite frankly, have come to Canada to do. And all the time it takes to accredit these nurses means we are waiting longer for more healthcare workers. Of course, all of us here today know that Alberta needs all the nurses that we can get, and we are working hard to address the urgent staffing requirements in all parts of Alberta's healthcare system.
Do you ever get that gut feeling? Many of us don't know this, but there's a huge connection between our gut and our mental health. A University of Lethbridge researcher recently received national recognition for her study on how gut inflammation drives changes in brain structure. So we asked Dr. Chelsea Mattis, what does chronic inflammation actually do to the brain?
When you have chronic inflammation, one of the things that we see is it's highly comorbid with depression and anxiety. And so this almost seems like sickness behaviors in the long term kind of morph into this depression, anxiety. And as a consequence, certain structures in your brain that are involved in assessing threats and how you cope with stress in your life, those parts of the brain become changed.
Dr. Mattis also says gut health can be related to diseases such as Alzheimer's. She'll have more details coming up in an interview with BCN's Jeanette Roche in the second half of our program. Well, the final numbers are in for the 13th annual Care for the Heart Radiothon that took place last week. A grand total of over $255,000 was raised for the Chinook Regional Hospital Foundation to distribute out to the greatest needs of the Lethbridge Hospital. The goal was $250,000 for the initiative. The funds will go toward medical equipment and training that they would otherwise not be able to afford. Officials with the foundation told us the event was a huge success.
We're very excited to surpass. It really shows our our community support sponsors, corporations. I mean, just a tremendous amount of support that we've received. Corporate, local funding, local businesses. It was just an absolutely an amazing day, and we really look at it from the patient experience as they enter the hospital, sort of the needs, be it if you have to come into emergency diagnostics and what have you, and whatever products and services that the foundation can provide and support in the areas and the greatest needs of the hospital.
The annual event features local radio stations who chat with doctors, nurses, and administration staff from the hospital to talk about the important work they do on a daily basis. A 12-year-old boy died in a single-vehicle quad rollover on Saturday morning. Police say the incident occurred by Range Road 190 near the town of Tabor. The name of the youth is not being released. A collision reconstructionist with the RCMP has been consulted. RCMP and Fort Macleod have now laid charges in connection with a fatal collision which took place on October 21st of last year at the intersection of Highway 2 and Highway 3 in Fort Macleod. Police say a Dodge Caravan was traveling east on Highway 3 when it collided with a semi-truck and trailer that was crossing Highway 3 and headed southbound on Highway 2. An adult male driver of the van, along with 2 young children, were injured. All 3 were taken to hospital, and sadly, a 5-year-old child did not survive. As a result, 38-year-old Brockett resident Ryan Scott Potts faces a wide range of charges, including impaired operation of a motor vehicle causing death, criminal negligence causing death, and driving an uninsured vehicle. Potts has a number of outstanding warrants for his arrest, and police are looking for him. If you've seen him, you're asked to call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. Police in Fort Macleod had a bit of a surprise on February the 9th. They clocked a 2003 Volkswagen Golf with BC plates going 178 kilometers an hour in a posted 100 kilometer an hour zone. When they pulled the driver over for dangerous driving, police also located a sawed-off shotgun, ammunition, and break-and-enter tools in his vehicle. 22-year-old Jacob Douglas Main of Sparwood, BC, faces a laundry list of charges, including dangerous operation of a motor vehicle, flight from police, driving while uninsured, and an unauthorized possession of a firearm. Main was released from custody and will be in court to answer to the charges on March the 8th. A Canada-wide arrest warrant has been issued for 24-year-old Bith Gatang Chual. He's been charged with first-degree murder in connection with a homicide of Edmonton resident Vanessa Ann Silva last September 15th. RCMP say Chual has ties to Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, and Manitoba. He's described as having a dark complexion, 6'4", 140 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. He's considered armed and dangerous. Police say if you see him, to not approach him, but instead call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. Well, we had a wind warning from Environment Canada today. Wind gusts up to 100 kilometers an hour today. Jeanette Roche is in now with an early look at the weather details. Jeanette, the Chinook winds have been bringing us warmer temperatures, but also lots of dust.
Yeah, so true, Hal. You know, I just washed my car on Sunday and I drove home through what appeared to be a dust storm all over my nice brand new washed car. So I wasn't too happy about that. But yeah, those Chinook winds picking up dust and everything else. As you mentioned, we had up to 100 kilometer per hour winds today. That wind warning has now ended. As we look to this evening now, we're seeing mixed precipitation. So in the form of showers and some flurries accumulating up to 5 centimeters of snow overnight into tomorrow, Tuesday, Valentine's Day. We are seeing a 60% chance of more flurries. And after that, the flurries should be gone. And I'll be back later in the show to give you that 7-day forecast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The red carpet was rolled out and those with special needs were made to feel loved and appreciated on Friday night at Parallel Church in Lethbridge. Night to Shine is a prom night experience that was originally started by the Tim Tebow Foundation. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains now, the Lethbridge Church was quite busy Friday evening as close to 200 participants made their way inside.
The Tim Tebow Foundation launched Night to Shine in 2014 to work with churches from around the world to offer an unforgettable prom night experience for people with special needs. It included dancing, limo rides, hair and makeup stations, a catered dinner, and even the paparazzi treatment. Participants told us how it felt to walk the red carpet.
How's Timmy?
A little bit of nerves too.
I'm nervous. I like all this going on right now. I like dancing sometimes. And then I am like kind of nervous sometimes.
How did that feel for you when you were coming through the front door?
Nervous.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Organizers of the noteworthy occasion said there were a large number of people with special abilities who showed up for the prom night extravaganza.
This is our biggest year yet, so tonight we have 176 individuals with special abilities in attendance, plus their caregivers, plus workers and volunteers, so it's a really big night.
Local dignitaries were also on hand to welcome participants and celebrate with them on Friday evening.
I think for me, it's just so important to be here because it's an opportunity to celebrate those in our community who are often put on the margins. And I think it's a chance for us as a community to come around them, to celebrate them, to be a part of life with them.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Oh, what a great story. 2 new UCP candidates are seeking the nomination for the Lethbridge West riding. Rick Dempsey and Tori Tanner are both in it to win it. Businessman Rick Dempsey says for the last 30 years, this city has served him so well, and it's his way of giving back.
I've always had a leadership mindset, and at the end of the day, it's we're sitting in West Lethbridge with an opposing view instead of a government, and at the end of the day, it's hopefully all of Lethbridge can be on the same train, and we can have a unified voice here.
Tori Tanner, who's originally from Saskatchewan, says she really wants to build a sense of community in Lethbridge West and explains 2 very important issues she wants to tackle if she wins.
One of the things that I had to learn in the last couple of years is that in order to make a difference, then you've got to be willing to step up to the plate, right? You got to be willing to put yourself out there, and that's what I'm doing with this candidacy. But some of the things that I am passionate about for sure is fiscal responsibility with government. I don't understand how you can run a government, a business, anything without balancing the budget. You can't live on credit. That's really something that's important to me. Also important is standing up for the rights of parents.
Whomever wins will be going up against the current MLA, the NDP's Shannon Phillips. The provincial election will be taking place on May the 29th. The province announced funding recipients for a program that moves circular economy projects forward. Environment and Protected Areas Minister Sonia Savage says this project will include recycling asphalt roof shingles, capturing and storing carbon in concrete, and inedible eggs that can be turned into a powder which can be fed to pets and livestock.
I'm very pleased to announce today that $58 million from Alberta's Tier Fund is being delivered through ERA to help successful Circular Economy Challenge projects progress through various stages of development. In a circular economy, a project's life cycle is extended through reuse, recycling, upcycling, resource recovery, and sustainable design. And innovators across Alberta will be using this funding for a number of exciting proposed initiatives.
The initiative is supported by the Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction Fund and delivered through Emissions Reduction Alberta. Britain says it will be conducting a security review in the aftermath of many unidentified objects being shot down over North America. Defense officials in the UK and our allies will review what these airspace intrusions mean for their security. They say this most recent development is another sign of how the global threat picture is changing for the worse. The announcement came after a U.S. fighter jet shot down an object over Lake Huron on Sunday, the 4th such downing over the U.S. or Canada this month. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, says many are looking for answers in regards to these unidentified objects being shot down across both Canada and the United States. She says the Biden administration is being pressed for answers.
So there's 2 schools of thoughts here in the United States. One comes from perhaps the right, where they are very hard on President Biden, questioning what he knows, what he's going to do about it, and whether this is either a distraction or is there more that we don't know about. And what are the details? So there's a big pushback from the Republicans over the weekend to figure out more, to get more transparency on this, and really to connect the dots.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, will have more on these unidentified flying objects coming up later in our program. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he gave the go-ahead to shoot down an unidentified object over the Yukon because it was a threat to civilian aircraft in the area.
It represented a reasonable threat to civilian aircraft, so I gave the order to take it down. Canadian and American fighter jets were scrambled, and an American F-22 successfully shot down the object. Recovery teams are on the ground looking to find and analyze the object.
Prime Minister Trudeau was in Whitehorse marking the 50th anniversary of a policy paper that preceded Yukon's modern self-government agreements. Back in 1973, First Nations chiefs traveled to Ottawa to deliver the document to then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau.
You came to visit my father in Ottawa. You came for a historic meeting about self-governance with this document, Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow. And the importance of that gesture, which led to the successful negotiation of modern treaties, goes so far beyond what you accomplished here for Yukon. It set the path for so much of what we refer to as reconciliation today. The idea of partnership, shared stewardship, grounded in respect for people who have been on this land from time immemorial. The understanding that there is a better way forward than the colonial structures that have defined this country for so long.
A shortage of personnel is challenging plans by the Canadian Air Force to introduce new military equipment. Between buying armed drones, launching satellites, upgrading North America's early warning systems, and bringing the F-35 online, officials say more personnel are desperately needed. Lieutenant General Eric Kenney says the Air Force is short close to 2,000 full-time members and 500 reservists at a time when it should be expanding. Residents in rural areas of southeastern Turkey have been struggling to overcome the consequences of the 7.8 magnitude earthquake, which rocked both Turkey and Syria a week ago, leaving more than 33,000 people dead.
Böyle çamurun içinde yatıyor. İkimiz, üçümüz, dördümüz bir yatıyor. Yer yok, ne de üç ev bir arada, üç, dört. Bak aha şu taca tutuyor ya.
Meanwhile, many in the Donetsk region of Ukraine have been lining up for food and trying to keep warm during the cold winter months. The war with Russia has now reached 1 year.
Не дай Бог наші, щоб не одійшли, щоб не остались, ми б... Ну, короче говоря, не дай Бог, я не пережив второго пришествия, ні.
Well, not a lot of snow here in our region, but Lethbridge did live up to its name as the Windy City earlier today. Wind gusts up to 100 kilometers an hour, but fortunately, they're dying down. Full weather details are coming up. Environment Canada issued a wind warning for our region earlier today. We had wind gusts up to 100 kilometers an hour near noon. You know, Category 1 hurricane is about 119 kilometers an hour. Jeanette Roche is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it appears as though the Chinook winds may be leaving us soon and more flurries may be on the way.
Yeah, you heard right, Hal. More flurries could be on the way. We are looking at mixed precipitation this evening, so we're seeing a slight chance of showers mixed with some flurries. We could see an accumulation of 5 centimeters of snowfall by morning, and then into Tuesday, another 60% chance of flurries. That's our cold day, too, for the week. -4 being the high, and then after that, we get back into the plus temperatures and mainly clear skies. So sunshine and 1 degree the high on Wednesday, up to 5 degrees on Thursday, 6 the high for Friday, all the way up to 7 degrees on Saturday, and then rounding out the week on Sunday with a high of 4 degrees. So we are getting back to the pluses. I don't know what's going on Tuesday. It's like an April Fool's joke, except it's Valentine's Day. So go figure. -2, the average high for this time of year. -10 is the average low. Our record high on this day was 12 degrees. That happened back in 1973. And in 1992, it was the record low, which was -20. 7/11, that is when the sun rose this morning. and sunset this evening at 5:20. So we're almost at that 10-hour mark of a daylight. Loving it. Okay, so both Victoria and Vancouver saw wind warnings in effect overnight. That's this evening. We're looking at 90K winds in the Juan de Fuca Strait and the Haro Strait, the Strait of Georgia as well. But those winds are going to die down by tomorrow, giving a 30-kilometer-per-hour wind in both of those cities. Sunshine also in both of those cities. 6 degrees the high in Victoria. Vancouver seeing a high of 5 degrees. -4 the high in Edmonton with a mix of sun and cloud. Calgary's high tomorrow -3. They are seeing some flurries tonight with an accumulation of 5 centimeters and then another 30% chance of flurries tomorrow. Okay, Saskatoon also seeing a 30% chance of flurries tomorrow. -10 the high, -7 the high in Regina. 60% chance of flurries there. 0 the high in Winnipeg. Winnipeg mainly cloudy skies tomorrow as we look to the central part of the country. Not so much with the precipitation, mainly clear skies. Lots of sunshine expected tomorrow in Toronto. 8 degrees the high there. 4 the high in Ottawa, partly cloudy skies. Montreal sitting at 3 tomorrow. A freezing drizzle overnight, but clearing by morning, so shouldn't be too bad of a day there. As we look to the East Coast, we're seeing 30% chance of flurries in Fredericton, -4 the high. Halifax seeing a snowfall warning in effect, 15 up to 25 centimeters of snow expected overnight, and then tomorrow another 5 centimeters of snow expected. 0 the high there, -3 the high in Charlottetown. Charlottetown also looking at a 30% chance of flurries. St. John's, Newfoundland. Okay, so we're seeing a winter storm warning in effect. Could see heavy snow, also mixed with some ice pellets, and then into tomorrow, 5 centimeters of freezing rain along the southern shore there, and some blowing snow, 70K winds. So lots happening up there in Newfoundland tomorrow. So that is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Bed Bath & Beyond Canada is going out of business, closing 54 stores across the country. Company officials say 400 full-time and 1,000 part-time employees will be affected. Bed Bath & Beyond had a net loss of $99.5 million for the 9-month period ending November 26, 2022. As of the same date, the company's assets were valued at around $480 million. Meanwhile, liabilities were worth almost $430 million. The parent company has shut scores of stores across the United States and warned last month that it may need to file for bankruptcy protection as it was unable to pay back its loans. Indigo Books and Music says it has partially restored services that were knocked out by a cybersecurity incident. It is investigating whether customer information was compromised. The bookstore chain was only able to accept cash for in-store purchases after its electronic payment system and website went down last Wednesday. Indigo says it changed its in-store payment technology and is now able to accept debit, credit, and gift cards in stores. But stores are still not able to accept returns in person. Customers may also still experience delays with part or all of online orders and returns. Toyota's next president says his new management team will lead an aggressive push on electric vehicles. Koji Sato says Japan's top automaker will develop a next-generation Lexus brand electric vehicle by the year 2026. Toyota also plans to beef up all of its EV models. The new leadership takes helm on April the 1st. Toyota, which makes the Prius hybrid, has at times been seen as lagging behind its rivals when it comes to electric vehicles. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 90 points on the day to finish at 20,702. The Dow was up 376 points to 34,245. The S&P 500 was up 46 on the day to 4137, and the Nasdaq was up 173 points to 11,891. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 42 cents to $80.14 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 11 cents to $2.41 US. Gold was even on the day at $18.53.49 US an ounce, and silver was also even at $21.99 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.05 per bushel, barley's at $9.10, canola's at $18.82, and corn is at $11.23 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.08 to $162.28. Feeder cattle March contract was up 80 cents to $187.20, and lean hogs were down 5 cents to $75.83. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $74.98 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the City of Lethbridge and AHS are adding 2 new ambulances. Officials say they will run 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, helping to provide advanced life support. The ambulances were made possible by an extra $304,000 in extra funding. More and more unidentified objects are being shot down across North America. Are they all Chinese spy balloons? Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will give us her thoughts next. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. More and more objects are being shot down all across North America. Now, are they all Chinese spy balloons, or is maybe something else going on? To talk about it in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles, California. Lisa, another object the size of a small car was shot down Friday over Alaska. The object was flying at about 40,000 feet. Military officials say it was posing a risk to civilian air traffic. Then, you know what? Another one was shot down over the Yukon on Saturday that violated Canadian airspace, and then Sunday over Lake Huron. At this point, do we know, are they all Chinese spy balloons? What's going on here?
We don't know too much about them, and that's really the question here is A, has this been going on for a while now, and have we not known about it? B, is this the first time that we're seeing the United States and Canada perhaps show some interest and some concern over what these are and the fact that they do present as a safety and security threat? And lastly, who is it? Where is it coming from? And how do we connect the dots on this? So there's 2 schools of thoughts here in the United States. One comes from perhaps the right, where they are very hard on President Biden, questioning what he knows, what he's going to do about it, and whether this is either a distraction or is there more that we don't know about. And what are the details? So there's a big pushback from the Republicans over the weekend to figure out more, to get more transparency on this, and really to connect the dots.
Did the military actually take some pictures before they actually shot it down with ballistic missiles? Do we actually get a close-up of what was being shot down?
Yeah, I haven't seen any. I don't know if there might be some more intel out there, perhaps surfacing today. I'm sure there will be a lot of media inquiries into the White House to figure out more about this. Perhaps a press briefing. Well, we won't get that much information, but there will be a lot of questions.
Now, Lisa, first spy balloons. Now, apparently, Chinese atmospheric monitoring satellites were spotted over Hawaii.
Over Hawaii at the end of January. But how? Why are we only hearing about this now? And what in juxtaposition with these other objects that we're seeing? So again, has this been going on for a long time? Is there a way to connect the dots on what's going on here? Now they're saying this is Chinese satellite that was shining these beams, these lights over Hawaii at the end of January. But again, what's being done about it? And is this really the Chinese posing an actual threat, or are they just feeling us out? Are they just nudging us to see how far they can go and how far, to what extent the Biden administration will move on this?
Now, outside of shooting down spy balloons, the U.S. military has been flexing some military muscles in the air after a test-launched an intercontinental ballistic missile into the Pacific Ocean, Lisa, in the neighborhood of China and North Korea, its adversaries.
Right. So flexing some muscle here. It's what the U.S. government calls routine. But why now? Is it just the timing? Is it important to understand the China threat, particularly when it comes to Taiwan, and obviously the North Korean threat that has been there for a very long time? But the point being, Hal, that our enemies obviously are on the march. And the fact that they feel comfortable flexing their muscles, and maybe we're just playing catch up and we're about to flex ours, and to say that we do have a presence in that part of the world, and we're here for it.
Now, the reports that Border Patrol interceptions of Chinese migrants, Lisa, attempting to cross into the U.S. illegally has increased by more than 800% compared to last year. That includes, close to 1,900 encounters between Border Patrol agents and Chinese nationals between October and the end of December.
Exactly. So almost 1,900 in only a handful of months. What does this mean? I mean, is it just the fact that, well, a lot of Chinese people want to get into this country, and what better way than our porous border from the south? I mean, there are many jokes going on around the world at the United States' expense, saying if you want to get to the United States, the fastest way to do so is get to Mexico and go north from there. So it's not surprising that a group of people would take advantage of that. But is there more to this story? Meaning, are there more malign elements that are trying to use our border? We have heard about ISIS, we've heard about Al Qaeda, we have heard about Hezbollah, we've heard about our obviously narco groups, fentanyl getting in, all kinds of illegal material entering our country through that border. So why not individuals who have, whether it's espionage or infiltrating the government or infiltrating our labs or anything else, why wouldn't they use this route as well?
Yeah, I mean, vetting a lot of the people crossing the border is key, not, like you said, not just for certain extremists, but also with potential spies here. Lisa, the death toll in Turkey and Syria has now surpassed 33,000 people. Such a tragedy. Now, the government there is investigating more than 130 building contractors allegedly involved in shoddy construction as thousands of the buildings collapsed following last Monday's 7.8 magnitude quake.
Yeah, it's really horrific what Mother Nature is capable of doing, and of course, the fact that these buildings were not able to withstand this kind of quake obviously helped Mother Nature with that high death toll. And of course, everyone they're pulling out right now has been under there for so long; they're only pulling out dead bodies. Very, very unfortunately. Now the question becomes, who's to blame? A lot of people are pointing fingers at the Turkish government, at Erdogan, saying that he did not move fast enough, he did not provide enough aid. As you know, a lot of countries nearby are lending a hand. I know Israel, being a very small country in ratio to the other countries in the Middle East surrounding Turkey, has sent in a big force to help out as well. But now Erdogan says, you know what, I'm going to point the finger right back at these building contractors who did not do their share in keeping these buildings up to code and able to withstand this kind of tremor.
You know, I remember a lot of times, too, when you hear about tsunamis or earthquakes hitting the island of Dominican Republic and Haiti, it's always Haiti that sees so much terrible devastation, but yet the Dominican Republic seems to come through it almost unscathed. And the reason behind that a lot of times is because the DR had a lot of American technology and engineering into their buildings and infrastructure as opposed to Haiti's. So same island, but completely different results when an earthquake hits. Lisa, thousands of Iranian Americans gathered where you are in Los Angeles calling for the Islamic Republic's regime to calling for their downfall. Now they're calling on the United States, Canada, and other Western governments to stand with the people of Iran as they continue to march for freedom and regime change.
Yeah, that's what they were saying over the weekend, filling the streets of downtown Los Angeles and other places in Washington and New York. They had smaller protests as well as in Europe and around the world. This coincides with the 44th anniversary of the Islamic revolution that brought this regime to power. So it was a very symbolic day. It was a weekend. So they thought that what a great day to have these protests go on around the world. But people flew in for this protest in Los Angeles. Our team was actually there covering it on the ground. Interviewing people who, were in tears over the significance of this protest, to stand in solidarity with those in Iran who are asking for freedom, who are asking for regime change and demanding that this government go. They're also calling on the governments of Canada, the United States, and the European Union to really catch up fast, not just with sanctions, not just with putting the Revolutionary Guard on the terror list, but really getting on board with regime change. It will take the West's support to really pull this off. But the people of Iran, they've kept at it for 5 months. They've been out on the streets. They have been brave enough, courageous enough to carry this movement through from protest to revolution, but they're asking for more help.
Do you think the Western world, including the United States and Canada, would get involved to the point similar to what happened with Iraq and Saddam Hussein?
Actually, they won't. And that's really the point of the Iranian people is, look, in 1979, you wanted the Shah of Iran to leave, and Jimmy Carter voiced that. Whether it was about the Arab Springs in Egypt or in Tunisia or in Libya, you wanted those dictators to leave. But now we have seen the State Department and Tony Blinken and Rob Malley, who is the Iran envoy. He is the guy who's in charge of negotiating the Iran nuclear deal will on the part of the United States. He's come out and said, we will not support regime change. We're not in the business of regime change. So when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to intervening and regime change, it seems like the White House does play pick and choose. And in this case, they have made it known that they will not support regime change. Very unfortunately, Hal, because on this program, we have many times outlined the ricochet effect it will have if you remove the head of the snake, and that is the Iran regime. You'll have less support for Hezbollah and Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. You'll take the Houthis out of Yemen. You'll take Hezbollah out of Lebanon, and the list goes on. So you will see a much more stable and secure Middle East if we just support regime change in Iran. And the Iranian people are saying, we will spearhead this. We just need the support of the Western world.
At least it sounds like Iran's president is going to be meeting with his Chinese counterpart this week to shore up ties between the two nations. How concerned should we in the West be as the strategic partnership between Iran and China continues to deepen?
Yeah, very concerned. So, of course, Hal, this is the side effect, the major side effect of isolating countries. So now you see the bad kids on the global stage uniting. So you see Russia and China and Iran, predominantly these three forces working hand in hand together. They're helping each other evade U.S. sanctions. They're helping each other move forward and becoming trade partners when they're losing all this other economic opportunity on the global stage. So we should be very concerned. We should look to China and really. Again, I bring this up often, but President Biden had an opportunity to sit down with Xi Jinping just a few months ago, and they had a over 3-hour meeting. But none of this was brought up. None of this leverage was used in the favor of the West to say, "Hey, we see what you're doing, and consider this the first slap on the wrist and the first warning you're going to get." But that the United States will not stand for this. But we're seeing the Chinese really play us all over the place, and the fact that they're getting cozy with Iran's regime is no surprise. They're getting cozier and cozier. Remember, now they have a 25-year deal to trade. There's oil and other things. You know that Iran's regime is also selling weapons to Russia to use in Ukraine. We've already seen the drones that they have sold to Russia be used in Ukraine. So, I mean, on the one end, we're fueling Ukraine with all this money, billions of dollars flushed into Ukraine. On the other end, we're allowing Iran to sell Russia weapons. So, I mean, there's got to be more accountability all over the world, and the United States has to step up its game when it comes to foreign policy.
Let me ask you something. Are we getting any closer to a peace deal between Ukraine's Zelensky and Russia's Putin? Where are we at this point?
Unfortunately not. The only thing we're seeing is Zelensky ask for more and more and more, and Russia is, pulling out new stops. So we're seeing a lot of fears that we're moving closer to perhaps the use of nuclear material in Ukraine, which will be absolutely devastating. It'll take this conflict to another level, but we're 1 year deep, and we don't see any signs of this ending anytime soon, unfortunately.
Have U.S. military officials or has the Biden administration talked about getting even more involved in the war in Ukraine, outside of supporting Ukraine with military aid, money, and training of different officers and soldiers?
Yeah, the latest is that they were giving them tanks, and we watched Germany go first. A lot of European nations volunteering to do the same, and then training a handful of Ukrainian military men in order to bring them up to some of the technology that the United States has. Look, we are so involved in this war already. A lot of money, a lot of manpower in the sense of training and providing them with up-to-date technology. But look, Zelensky's hand is still extended. He's asking for more, and he says it's not enough. So then the question becomes, Hal, what is enough? When will it be enough? And what's the end goal? If we don't see that there's a chance that the Ukrainians will be victorious in this, then what are we putting this good money after bad into Ukraine for? To begin with. So we've got a lot of things going on around the world, and the fact that we're so tied up in Ukraine may preclude us from helping Taiwan. If that conflict begins anytime soon, we have Iran docking its ships in Panama and developing a presence just at the U.S. footstep. These are just a few headlines of the week. So this is what's going on around the world. And instead of pouring all of our assets, all of our money and resources into Ukraine, we should really wake up and pay attention to some of these other threats as well.
Many other countries as well have talked about being vulnerable by sending so much of their military aid to Ukraine, and the fact that they don't have enough anymore to give. And if somebody were to attack their nation, they would be quite vulnerable. And the UK comes to light, for example. They talked about that as well.
Yes, exactly right. There's been many reports here in the United States as well that people worry about our ability to reproduce more and have some sort of arsenal should Taiwan need us or anywhere else. So it is definitely a concern. And look, how at the end of the day, there has to be some sort of calculation made here. There should be a weighing of the pros and cons in getting further involved and really investing more of our resources in this war. Again, when is this going to be over, and when is enough enough?
She's our foreign affairs expert who joins us each and every week from Los Angeles. Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
There is much research that takes place in universities across Canada. The University of Lethbridge is no different. It recently earned national recognition for research on how gut inflammation drives changes in brain structure. Turns out there's a huge connection between our gut and the functioning of our other systems in the body. So today we are speaking with Dr. Chelsea Mattis, who did her postdoc research on the subject. She recently received a L'Oreal Canada for Women in Science Research Excellence Fellowship and one of 3 Royal Society of Canada Alice Wilson Awards. Dr. Mattis, she joins me now. Welcome to Bridge City News. And first of all, congratulations on your work being recognized.
Yes, thank you. It's, science is kind of a slow process. You plant seeds and it's years before you see results. So it's just one of those harvest seasons, it feels like.
How long have you been working on this?
So I've been working on this particular question since about 2017.
Okay.
So
about 5 years.
4 or 5 years.
Okay, so this recognition obviously validates how important the research is and how widespread and debilitating gut inflammation can be for people. So some of us, may not always see that connection between the gut and the brain. So maybe tell us, how does chronic gut inflammation drive changes in brain structure? How does that all work?
Well, we are all familiar with what happens when you get sick. So imagine you have a bout of food poisoning or just some stomach upset, a gastrointestinal bug of some kind. We all know what that feels like. You feel these classic sickness behaviors. You feel fatigue, lethargy. You don't enjoy your hobbies. You kind of just want to, recoil and go in a corner, and maybe you're a little bit more irritable to the people that you live with. But as the inflammation in your gut subsides, so do those sickness behaviors. But if you have chronic gut inflammation, that is a different situation because it becomes something that your body needs to adapt to. You then still need to go out and get food and take care of your children. And so in some ways, the body is just adapting to this new normal, this chronic gut inflammation. And as a consequence, your brain has different changes to kind of accommodate for that. And this can be driven through immune mechanisms or neural mechanisms or hormonal mechanisms.
Okay, so what is it actually doing to the brain then?
So there's quite a number of things happening when you have chronic inflammation. One of the things that we see is it's highly comorbid with depression and anxiety. And so this almost seems like sickness behaviors in the long term kind of morph into this depression, anxiety. And as a consequence, certain structures in your brain that are involved in assessing threats and how you cope with stress in your life, those parts of the brain become changed. And this is what we see, people that have chronic gut issues, or really any kind of chronic inflammation disease, what they will find is that, maybe they'll be in a period of remission where things seem to be okay, but then something will happen in their life, like a bad breakup, or perhaps, they lost their job, or a pet dies. Those stresses are enough to actually drive a flare, a remission, or a flare up of disease again. And so in this way, it changes the way your brain structure is, but also then how you perceive and respond to things in the environment. And that can also have then impacts on the disease itself.
Oh, that's fascinating. So can the condition of one's mind be based on how healthy their gut is? Is it kind of like symbiotic like that almost?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. People are always wondering, well, what can I do to kind of improve, the situation I have? So we have, there's medicines that people take that affect their gut inflammation, but also brain inflammation. And so those are often antidepressants or anti-anxiety medicines. But other things like cognitive behavioral therapy can be a way that people can sort of change the way that you perceive the environment to kind of help reduce amounts of stress. Other things like anything that can activate this beautiful nerve called the vagus nerve can actually drive this anti-inflammatory pathway. And you can activate this through meditation, through deep breathing exercises, through yoga, singing. So there's lots of kind of different ways that you can sort of control from more of like a top-down way to kind of help manage.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't sound like modern medicine at all. It almost sounds like a jump in philosophy from Western medicine to Eastern medicine. Do you see it that way at all?
Certainly, there's a lot of value to the kinds of medicine that are practiced, not traditional medicine. Of course, I would always say that the most important thing is to see a professional doctor to manage the symptoms of disease, because that's really important. But I think increasingly people are recognizing that, the anxiety and the depression that is comorbid with lots of chronic diseases, it's not because you have the disease. You're not anxious and depressed because you have the disease. That's part of it. But it's also a very important component of the disease. The disease also involves these sort of behavioral changes to kind of adapt to this new normal. And in many ways, then treating the way that the anxiety and depression is an important component of treating the disease holistically. So certainly, like we all know, diet and exercise and good sleep, these are really important things to help, with brain and body to help good function. But then there's these other little things that can be really helpful too, that maybe are more overlooked. But certainly, I wouldn't say that singing is a good thing to do instead of taking medicine.
Yeah, I can see how it would make you feel better though, especially if you're a good singer. Even if you're a bad singer, right? we all like to sing in the shower. So does this also mean that maybe gut health could affect other brain functions like learning or memory or other things like that?
Yes, no, absolutely. People that have chronic gut inflammation will often experience not only anxiety and depression, but also cognitive dysfunction. So this is kind of like working memory or focusing on certain things, attention. So people that have chronic illnesses often will attend to the things that they experience. So, for example, they might attend more to things related to gut health or things that remind them of pain or the anticipation of pain. So they might attend more to that. And so it does become kind of a bit of a reworking in that sense too. But certainly cognitive dysfunction, then this sort of brain fog that we hear about in terms of long COVID, it's a very real thing, and it's a part of the disease, of the immune response.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. Could there also be a connection between gut health and, let's say, Alzheimer's disease, or is that completely different?
No, absolutely not. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that gut health impacts brain health and mental health in many different kind of disease states. So, for example, people that have Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease or dementia, studies have looked at the communities of microbiota in their gut. So these are the bacteria, the fungi, the viruses that live in your gut all the time. But people that have chronic diseases, including Alzheimer's, they will notice the community of their gut will actually be shifted. It'll be less diverse. It might have certain sort of bugs in it that aren't really associated with healthy outcomes. And so we do see that it all is connected. The things that are in your gut, they can secrete things that directly act on neurons that go into the bloodstream and directly impact and are able to access the brain. And so we do know that, the microbiome is sort of like this living organ inside of us, producing things, responding to stress and diet and sleep. And so this also, is a huge part of sort of the holistic, look at a particular disease.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because that term gut health it's so thrown away. It's thrown around these days. It's kind of almost like a catchphrase. But when you get right down to the basics, what does it actually mean by having good gut health? Like we hear about the bad bacteria and whatnot. So, does it really just come down to a person's diet?
So this is a great question. And this is a question that researchers are asking, like, what is a healthy gut microbiome? And it's different for different people. A lot of it is genetic and sort of based on sort of what is around you. You know, was it a vaginal birth? Was it a cesarean section? What kind of foods were you exposed to as a child? Did you have a pet in the house? Are you an only child or do you have a huge family? These things all make a difference. But of course, also the things that you eat and how you're exposed to things in your environment, that all makes a big difference as well. But what we do know is that there seems to be a core microbiome for people that once they sort of have reached a certain age, like maybe 3 or 4, it kind of stabilizes to some extent, but it does still shift. And we know that a healthy microbiome seems to be associated with increased diversity. So people that have good health in older age will have a more diverse microbiome than people that may be suffering from different kinds of diseases, whether it's Alzheimer's or ulcerative colitis or diabetes. And so a diverse microbiome seems to be associated with health. And the best way to get a diverse microbiome is to eat a diverse diet, rich in different things. In particular, things that are like probiotics, like that have bacteria in them, like yogurts, things like that are fermented foods like kimchi or sauerkraut or kombucha, and then just lots and lots of fiber. Because plant fibers are very important because they don't get digested in your small intestine, so they go to your large intestine or your colon, and suddenly all those really important gut bacteria have food to eat. So if you're not eating a diet rich in fibers, then you're kind of starving out really important players in your gut microbiome that are important for your health.
Wow, that is fascinating. So if somebody has chronic inflammation in the gut, what would you advise them to do? Is it mostly diet related, or could there be some other underlying problem there?
Well, I would always recommend, of course, people talk to their physicians and also get a referral to a specialist if you're dealing with gut specific problems. But I would also say it's important to, start looking at the diet, starting a diet journal and getting a sense of, are there certain foods that might trigger discomfort? People frequently find that lactose or gluten, suddenly they have, sensitivities to that they weren't aware of before. But also, yes, I would say, a healthy diet is going to help anything. So, again, like a diet that's really rich in diversity, if you can try and incorporate fermented foods and lots of fibers and probiotics. So, I mean, it's an important component of health, but it's also important to start maybe paying a bit more attention to what's going in as well. So, that food diary, I think, is something that most physicians would sort of recommend people would struggle.
Yeah, I understand that your work has therapeutic potential as well. So what are you finding that may help remediate chronic inflammation-induced changes in the brain?
So we're looking at a number of different things. My research program is kind of looking more from like top down. We're not looking at attenuating or suppressing gut inflammation, but rather we're looking at, okay, what's happening in the brain? And if we change things in the brain, might that change things in the gut too? And one of the things that we're looking at is psilocybin. And so this is a really exciting drug because it has been shown to have really, potential for people that have drug-resistant depression. And so people that have, chronic gut illnesses and have this comorbid anxiety and depression, a different kind of drug might be really helpful for them. So we're looking at psilocybin, and I'm also looking at how certain cannabinoids might be helpful as well, like CBD. There's a whole bunch of other ones, CBG, CBDV. And so we're looking at sort of, non-traditional kinds of medicines to see how that might impact the brain.
So it's still in the research phase now, or should people be running to the cannabis store to pick up these CBDs?
So I work with mice. I work with mouse models, and we're really good at curing diseases in mice. Of course, translating that to people is a little bit more difficult. But we're looking at the mechanisms to understand how these things might be helpful and how different groups of people that have diseases might be helped by certain things more than others. So there's a whole, subpopulations within a group of sick people that might find treatments that work for them that might not work for other people. But I would say, people are finding success with certain kinds of cannabinoids in attenuating certain kinds of pain or I'd say it's more related to pain than it is to inflammation. But it's a very case by case basis, and I would be hesitant to like recommend anyone do any without the advice of their doctor.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Like, do you think that as a result of your research that there could be other methods to treat mental health issues in the future? Like, where could this lead?
Absolutely. I think that by understanding how chronic inflammation changes the brain, because one of the problems is when you have chronic diseases and then you're in a period of remission and you're trying to stay in that remission, well, your brain structure has been changed fundamentally in certain ways. And then how can you kind of revert that back to, something that will improve your quality of life? Sure, it might be adaptive to have those changes in the brain, but evolution always doesn't really care about your quality of life. We want people to be happy and have healthy lives. And so some of these drugs that we're looking at are maybe more targeting sort of inflammation-induced anxiety and depression, which is a different kind of depression than someone who maybe is a certain genetic predisposition to these sorts of things, or maybe experienced, trauma in early life that would lead to sort of depression and anxiety. So we're looking at a kind of a different perspective, like a different type of anxiety and depression in people. But I think that looking at the different kinds of drugs that might be available and not necessarily the anti-inflammatory drugs that were traditionally looked at for, suppressing inflammation in the brain. I think by looking at some of these drugs that have been traditionally maligned and pushed aside as sort of psychedelics and they're recreational and there's no value to them medicinally, I think increasingly researchers are understanding that's not the case. We really need access to these drugs so we can test them and try them and help people.
Yeah, it is absolutely fascinating stuff. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but Dr. Chelsea Mattis, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate having you on. And once again, congratulations on being recognized nationally. That's a huge feat for you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Chelsea Mattis is a researcher at the University of Lethbridge who was recently recognized nationally for her findings on the gut-brain health connection. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.